Dear loving children, I hope you are keeping fine. Most of you are doing the test very well. I want all of you should do each day's work that day itself. You should write down the questions and answers neatly in your notebook, and you should learn those questions and answers, and you should get ready for the next day is a test. I want that all of you should read the textbook, the chapter which we are going to take at least 2 or 3 times, so that you have a better understanding of the lesson. There is no substitution for textbook reading. The online classes only will help you to learn the lesson. But for a thorough learning, you must read the textbook. In the previous chapter, we studied about the making of the global world. When we studied about making of the global world, we said that when people travel from one place to another, they carry their ideas, they carry their inventions. And we also studied about who are the people who traveled in the beginning. We studied about the travelers, the priests or the missionaries, the pilgrims. And they carried with them their culture, their technology, their ideas that we studied in the previous chapter. The chapter that we are going to study in history now is the print culture and the modern world. We cannot imagine without print today. We can see the evidence of print in newspapers, magazines, calendars, diaries, advertisements, official letters, printing of textbooks. School education is possible today because of a print culture. Millions of copies of textbooks are printed and circulated. We set up libraries because of the print culture. So, when we study about print culture, we must also think about a period when there was no print available. Knowledge was transformed orally, and there was a hearing public. But with the onset of print culture, we find it brought about a tremendous change in the lives of people. It brought about enlightenment, it brought about progress, it brought about revolutions. It changed the lives of people, it changed the culture of people. That is what we are going to study in this chapter, Print Culture and the Modern World. We are going to study about the history of print. Who introduced printing technology and how it was spread to other parts of the world. So, let us study in detail about the history chapter 2, print culture and the modern world. The first question of this chapter is what is calligraphy? The art of beautiful and stylized writing is called calligraphy. When you write letters in a beautiful and stylized way, you can see the example in the picture. That is called the calligraphy. Skilled scribes were employed to write books. So I hope you understood what is calligraphy, the art of beautiful and stylized writing is called calligraphy. Now let us come to the next question. Give an account of print in China. We must know that the paper was first invented in China. Later that paper was exported to European countries. Necessity is the mother of invention, we have heard about. Why printing first developed in China? The first point. The imperial state in China was a major producer of books for a long time. Because China possessed a huge bureaucratic system. China recruited its personnel through civil service examinations. We have IAS, IFS and IPS examinations. So China recruited its personnel through civil service examinations. So they used to conduct civil service examinations. For the examinations, textbooks were printed on a large scale. As the number of candidates increased, more textbooks were printed. That is how printing developed in China. I told you in the beginning, paper was also first developed in China. So not only textbooks were used for civil service examinations. The next point, merchants used print in their everyday lives to get trade information. And as books became cheaper in China, reading became a leisure activity, especially among women. Women began to write books. Women began to read autobiographies. Women began to read fictional narratives. Women began to read poetry. So, the reading became a leisure activity, especially among the women of China. Now let us move on to the next question. Give an account of print in Japan. First of all, let us find out who introduced printing from China to Japan. Buddhist missionaries from China introduced hand printing in Japan. Not only in Japan, they also introduced it in Korea also. So it was the Buddhist missionaries from China who introduced a hand printing system in Japan. We'll learn more about in the next question coming. What kind of system, hand printing system was introduced? That hand printing system was called wood block printing system. The oldest Japanese book is the Buddhist Diamond Sutra. That is the oldest Japanese book. Please note down that name of the book. A one-word question may be asked. Buddhist Diamond Sutra. You can also note down what are the features of this Buddhist Diamond Sutra. It was printed in Japan 868 AD. And the Buddhist Diamond Sutra had contained six sheets, and it also contained woodcut illustrations. So printing came to Japan around 768 or 770 AD. The Buddhist Diamond Sutra was printed in 868 AD. Then pictures were printed on textiles, playing cards and paper money in Japan. Books were cheap and abundant in Japan. So more and more people could read books. Libraries and bookstores were packed with various types of books. There were books on women. There were books about musical instruments. There were books about calculations. There were books about a tea ceremony called Chiayu. China, there is a way of preparing tea that is called, which is called Chiayu, the tea ceremony. You can see in the picture. They have a special way of making tea. And there were also books about flower arrangements in Japan. The flower arrangements in Japan is called Ikebana. You can see in the picture. One example. Ikebana is the method of flower arrangement in Japan. Besides this, there were also books about etiquette, manners, which we should practice in the society at home. There were also books about cooking. There were also books about tourist places. So that is all about given account of printing in Japan. Now let us move on to the next question. What do you understand by woodblock printing? It was first developed in China. It is a method of printing in which books were printed by rubbing paper against the inked surface of wood blocks. You can see in the picture how textile printing is done. I told you they used to print on textiles, on playing cards, on paper money, etc. So the matter was assembled on a wood block and rubbing paper against the inked surface of the wood blocks, printing was done. That was the oldest technology adopted by the Chinese. That technology later we find the technology was transferred to European countries from East Asia, especially from China. So that is all about woodblock printing. It is a method of printing in which books were printed by rubbing paper against inked surface of wood blocks. Now let us find out who introduced woodblock printing system to Italy. Marco Polo, who was a traveler, introduced woodblock printing system to Italy in 1295 AD. Marco Polo was a traveler and he stayed in China for a few years, and as he went back from China, he took the woodblock printing system to Italy and introduced it in Europe. Later you will study when John Gutenberg developed the mechanical printing press. The same technology was transferred from Europe to Asian countries. So here you can see the picture of Marco Polo. He was the one who introduced woodblock printing system to Italy in 1295 AD. Now let us find out what is vellum. You can see in the picture how things are written on vellum. Vellum is a parchment made from the skin of animals. It was meant for aristocratic circles and rich monastic libraries. You must understand, in the olden days, books were very expensive. Only aristocratic families, rich families, and rich monasteries only could afford to buy books. So books were written on for this aristocratic circles, and for monastic libraries, books were written on vellum, that is a parchment made from the skin of animals. The poor people could not afford to buy such kind of books. Now let us come to the next question. What are manuscripts? Before print came into existence, manuscripts were prevalent in the society. Manuscripts are handwritten documents written on palm leaves or on the skin of animals. So you can see in the example of a palm manuscripts. Handwritten documents were written on palm leaves with a special knife, and they used to stitch it together and keep it together. If you make a visit to any museums, you can see this kind of manuscripts in the museums. Or they used to write on the skin of animals. So that is where books were written, documents were written in the olden times, handwritten manuscripts, because printing was not available at that time. Now let us come to the next question. Why the manuscripts were not so popular at that time? Manuscripts were not popular because manuscripts could not satisfy the ever-increasing demand for books. The demand for books were increasing, and it was very difficult to write books with hand. It will take maybe a month to write books. Another point is that copying was expensive and laborious. A lot of labor was required. A lot of people had to work behind. So that is another reason why manuscripts were not popular. Copying was very expensive and laborious, so books were very costly. And it was a time-consuming business. A lot of time was required for writing down a book. So that is why it was not popular. Another important reason, the manuscripts were fragile. Fragile means very weak. It can be easily damaged and awkward to handle. Very awkward to difficult to handle manuscripts. They could not be carried around or read easily. So the manuscript could not be easily carried around like our textbooks, or they cannot be read easily. So it was very difficult for people to carry around this kind of books. So their circulation remained limited. So we have learned the question and the answer. Why manuscripts were not popular? Because they could not satisfy the demand for books, and it was expensive, and it was time consuming, it was laborious, and they were fragile, awkward to handle. So their circulation remained limited. That is why manuscripts were not so popular. Only the rich people could afford to buy manuscripts. Now let us come to the next question. Give an account of Gutenberg's printing press. Gutenberg developed the first printing press in Germany in 1430 AD. From where did he get the idea to make the mechanical press? The olive press provided the model for the printing press. His father had an estate, and in his farmland estate, he had a olive press and wine press. Gutenberg got this idea of setting up a mechanical press from olive press. Besides that, he learned the art of polishing stones, and he acquired the skill to make lead molds. He was a very expert goldsmith. He learned how to make a lead mold. The molds were used for casting metal types for the letters of the alphabet. So, with the help of this mold, he used to make letters of the alphabet. Gutenberg adapted existing technology to design his innovation. He used the olive press, and he used his knowledge of making lead molds. All that he adapted and made the mechanical press. He perfected the press in 1448. I already told you. First he made it more perfect by 1448 AD. The first book he printed was the Bible. It is said that it took almost 3 years for him to print 180 copies of Bible. At that time, making 180 copies of a Bible within a period of 3 years was something great. So, at the end of the class, I want you to note down all these questions and answers neatly on your notebook and learn those question answer and get ready for the text the very next day. At the same time, you must also read the textbook 2 or 3 times so that you have a better understanding of the print culture and the modern world. Wish you all the best.